Coming up on the Men at the Movies podcast, I talk with Britt Mooney and Sarah Daniels about the Neverending Story. We all get tempted to either lose ourselves in escapism or distracted in busyness. But great stories have the capacity to reveal our worth and our identity. We were never meant to live an ordinary life. Every story is a never-ending story. Join us as we discover God's truth in this movie.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story, the story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being. Hello and welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name's Paul McDonald, and joining me on the studio, it's not just me and one person, it's me and two people. So we've got Sarah and Britt joining us because they couldn't argue enough about who wanted to do this one more. So they're like, we're going to have a tug of war. This could be the never-ending podcast.
Could be.
So how you guys doing tonight?
So good. So glad to be here.
Doing well, man. God is good. I'm in the middle of an amazing story.
Yeah, come on.
So we are obviously talking about the Neverending Story. It came out in 1984, based on a book written in 1979. We believe it's German in its basis, in its origin. And really, as we were prepping and preparing, I said, I'm just along for the ride. Sarah and Britt are going to drive this dragon. And we're going to go from there. So why are you guys so excited about this movie?
I mean, obviously there's a huge nostalgia element to it for me and Sarah, I'm sure, both. Oh, yeah. And this is one of those movies that, as much as I loved it as a kid, and I can see maybe some flaws as I get a little older, and it's a little dated here and there, and some of the effects aren't great, but overall, I think the movie means more to me now than it even did back then, because as a writer and with a lot of the stuff that God has shown me over time, he has shown me so much about the power of story, and that this movie just shows in so many ways how we were designed to be involved in a great story. And so that's why I love this movie, and I keep coming back to it. And I think it's one of those movies that will always resonate because of that fact, you know?
Like you were saying, for me, also tremendous nostalgia factor. Just grew up loving this movie. I could relate to the movie very strongly when it first came out because, the character of Bastian was bullied a lot. He was a huge bookworm. I was both of those things as well, so I immediately, was able to put myself in his shoes. And, as I got older, the movie really just impressed itself upon me as, what are we called to do in life? What are we given to do that only we can do? And then why don't we do it? And what keeps us from doing the things that God's called us to do? Because he's literally given us everything that we need to do them. And a lot of times we're scared, or we're thinking, maybe I misheard God, or maybe, this isn't really me. I don't think I'm equipped to do this. I think that they need somebody else, somebody bigger, braver, stronger, more capable. But it's just such an incredible story about, at least to me, like how he calls anyone, and he's given us all like specific gifts and talents to do the things that he's given us to do. He's given us all, an incredible destiny to walk in. And it's just, this movie just speaks a lot about that to me, what we're given to do and why many times we fear to walk in it.
Yeah, we're going to talk about both those things, the power of story, and then kind of why story matters. And take 47,000 different rabbit trails and side roads, and who knows what's going to happen. But we see right in the beginning that I think two of the things that prevent us from reaching our calling are two things that has happened to young Bastian, right? By the way, so I can beat Britt to the punch, we are going to talk about spoilers. So if you haven't seen this movie that's almost 40 years old now, just to give you a heads up, we're going to talk about the movie. But he goes through two things. One is loss. We find out that his mother has died. And then he's got his dad telling him, get your head out of the clouds, get your feet on the ground, quit dreaming. It's time to get over her, basically. And I think those are those two of those main things that keep us from pursuing the things that God has given to us. Two major obstacles that show up is the idea of loss, and then critique or judgment or condemnation or whatever you want to call it. It's those two sides of a sword that sort of bar the way for us to proceed into our own story. Well,
I mean, I think that I don't know if it's as much criticism as it's practicality, as it's an idea that so there's a couple different things that happen when we're dealing with the world and we're in grief and we get bullied. We seek escape, right? We seek relief. And that's initially what Bastian is seeking, right? When he's drawing unicorns and he's reading Treasure Island, and if you go through that discussion with the book guy, the bookstore guy, he's seeking relief. But the bookstore guy says, if you read this book, this isn't safe. This is not a safe story. And this is an important thing because while we are attracted to stories, we have to realize that story, the real power of story is not in distraction. That's not what they're really meant for. God isn't telling an eternal redemptive story just because it's fun. He's telling an eternal redemptive story because it's transformative. And that means we change. And that means we have to admit that we're wrong. And that means we have to admit that we have problems. And that means, see what I mean? Like, that's not safe and that's not fun. And so that's the story that Bastian is invited into. But where he starts is he's been trying to get his mind off of his mom in an escapism way, while his dad has been trying to get his mind off of the grief in work and practicality. And both of them are extremes that are dangerous because they're not real, because neither one of them have hope. I mean, the ultimate, this is going to be crude, but the ultimate sort of side of the distraction is porn. I'm just telling you, like, the ultimate, I just want relief.
Right.
Like, there's no substance to it. It's still nothing. You see what I mean? There's no substance to it. And so that's what we see in Bastian in the beginning. That's where he has to change. And his dad, I don't know, maybe in the book his dad changes, but we don't see any sort of transformation in his dad. But I think that's what we do, is we either try to just escape life and our problems, which isn't healthy, or in like the clouds and sort of distraction, entertainment, consumerism, or we try to escape it with practicality. If I just keep working, I won't think about it. And both of them are nothing.
I want to play that clip of Bastian in the bookstore. And then Sarah, I want your thoughts on that talk, and feel free to pull in all your never ending knowledge.
She's wearing the t-shirt, by the way. She's wearing the t-shirt.
Of course, she always does. She's got the orange. She's got her own orange.
I do.
So in this scene, Bastian is running from bullies. He goes into a bookstore, and the bookstore owner's telling him, "Get out. Kids don't like books." And then Bastian sort of says, "I like books." in which case the guy, the bookstore owner kind of, you said is his name Mr. Coriander?
Coriander, yes.
Just like the seasoning.
I guess.
Spelled differently.
Yes.
But he invites him in, but Mr. Coriander, the bookstore owner, is reading a book and it piques Bastian's interest. So he asks him about that book, which is the Neverending Story.
Look, your books are safe. While you're reading them, you get to become Tarzan or Robinson Crusoe.
But that's what I like about him.
But afterwards you get to be a little boy again.
What do you mean?
Listen. Have you ever been Captain Nemo? Trapped inside your submarine while the giant squid is attacking you?
Yes.
Weren't you afraid you couldn't escape?
But it's only a story.
That's what I'm talking about. The ones you read are safe.
And that one isn't?
Don't worry about it.
But you just said it was...
Forget about it. This book is not for you.
Quite frankly, I can't believe that Bastian didn't get his hands on the book faster. Like, book's not safe? Give it to me. I'm taking it, man. It's mine. So, but no, I mean, I had this thought before, but re-listening to that quote just really, re-impressed it on me, is books really speak a lot. I mean, Bible included, especially the Bible, speak into our identity as people because, in the movie, obviously it shows you how Bastian's bullied and he's kind of shy and he's obviously not very athletic because his dad mentions he's not trying out for the swim team and he's, can't get on a horse and stuff like that. So, but in the book, it goes a little further with a description, and Bastian is like, he's like a short, little, fat kid, and he, is a coward, like that's why he's running from the bullies, is because he won't even stand up to the bullies. He's a little, pasty faced, cowardly little fat boy, and stuff. And so that kind of person, like I was extremely shy too, like I know it's hard for you guys to believe now, but there was a time when I did not talk.
I find that very hard to believe.
There was a time in my life where I did not talk, and stuff. And I was a big crybaby, like I was constantly crying. And whenever anybody would tease me about anything, I would burst into tears, and stuff. And so you're reading books like Tarzan and Robin Crusoe and Anne of Green Gables and, things like that. And these are people that we want to be because these people know what to say. They're heroic, they're beautiful, they're brave, if you're a woman, you've got men coming to fight for you, to rescue you. If you're a man, you've got, dragons to fight and adventures to have. These are things that we want. These are things that we want to do, that we want to be. So, of course, I understand why Bastian's like, yeah, I get to imagine that I'm Robin Crusoe, and it's amazing, and stuff. And so when Mr. Coriander's like, yeah, but afterwards you get to be a little boy again, and Bastian's like, I don't want to. Which is part of the reason why he takes the Neverending Story in the first place, because how amazing is that? A book that you don't have to stop being your everyday, regular, boring self. You get to be the hero of this book that doesn't end. I mean, yeah, so quite frankly, I can't believe that Bastian didn't just grab it out of his hands and make for the door. Because I know if that had been me, I would have done it in a heartbeat at that point in my life. It's like, yes, I will take that from you right now. But also as you get older, and you begin to understand yourself as a person better, books help you understand who you are. Books give you, things to shoot for, as I got older, I know I've talked before about Lord of the Rings, it's like I tried to read the book a lot, and it's a thick book and it's hard to get into. You have to really want to read it, which I didn't get into until I saw the movie. But the character of Sam just, like I was so caught up in his character, and that made me want to read the book, and stuff. And so you're drawn into those things. You're drawn into the characters because they inspire you, and you're like, I want to be more like this person. And you kind of, it kind of forms you, as a person. It helps build your personality and your identity, and they help you understand who you are because they help you understand more about what you want.
You had shared a quote from the book because you wrote one of your chapters on the Neverending Story, and it really, and I'm guessing some of it will be available on your blog.
Yes.
forgedinfilm.org.
Thank you.
But this is a story. When you sent it to us and I read it, I was like, oh, I think we can relate to this. When Bastian, like in the story, takes the book, there's almost a little narration that says, if you have never spent whole afternoons with burning ears and rumpled hair, forgetting the world around you over a book, forgetting cold and hunger, if you have never read secretly under the bedclothes with a flashlight because your father or mother or some other well-intentioned person has switched off the lamp on the plausible ground that it was time to sleep because you had to get up so early, if you have never wept bitter tears because a wonderful story has come to an end and you must take your leave of the characters with whom you have shared so many adventures, whom you have loved and admired, for whom you have hoped and feared, and without whose company life seems empty and meaningless. If such things have not been a part of your own experience, you probably won't understand what Bastian did next, which is when he took the book, The Neverending Story, from Mr. Coriander's shop. But knowing we're all giant reader dorks in here, I want to say, what are some of the stories that when I read those descriptions or those scenes, what stories were you reading that kind of brought up those emotions?
There's so many. I mean, obviously there are the originals like Narnia and, a lot of those, the Black Stallion books that I consumed when I was a kid. I mean, there's so many of those books when I was a kid. I just consumed them. And then, of course, even when I got older, there was Stephen King and there was, Anne Rice, and then there was, Tolkien and Joe Abercrombie. And I mean, there's so many that it's like, reading a book is an intimate thing. Like you literally, when you get into a book, it is just you and the book. Like when you really get into it. And yeah, we all totally get that because it's true. Like we all get that moment of, I want to read this book. I have to get alone, right? I have to get in a place that's comfy where I know I'm going to be for a while. And he's got blankets and he's like, but he had it in his mind, like, I'm going to go to the attic, and it's at the, like all of that sort of stuff. So,
So the one that you said, you want to be somewhere private. I remember I was reading the Fitz and the Fool series by Robin Hobb, which is one of my favorites. It's actually 3 separate trilogies. So there's 9 books of these 2 characters, basically. And without spoiling it, late in the, like 8th book of the series, maybe, there is one of the key characters is obviously about to die. And I'm sitting there in a Starbucks because I had done some errands and was a little early for going to work. And I said, nope, I'm going out to my car because these people in Starbucks are not going to watch me cry over this death that's about to happen.
Come on. Everything about that paragraph was like so right on. That was me when I was growing up, reading at night by flashlight, all of it. Yeah, I was trying to think of some of the books that I just like deeply loved and connected to when I was younger. Anne of Green Gables, that was obviously a big one. The whole, series by Ellen Montgomery was great. A Wrinkle in Time was really important to me when I was growing up. Oh, the character of Meg was so important to me because she was the first like book heroine that I came across that was like so flawed.
Like female hero,
Yes.
right? Not
Yes.
like the hard drug.
Yes. Yeah, she was so flawed. I mean, she got angry. She had a really short temper. She made lots of mistakes. I thought she was so great, and I could relate to a lot of those things, and it was really refreshing to see a female hero that wasn't, perfect. So that was awesome. Chronicles of Narnia. I remember when I finished The Last Battle, and I was like, oh shoot, there's no more books. I was like so
Right?
bummed out. I was like, especially because like the last battle ends with like, this is just the beginning of your adventures, and I'm sitting here going, but what are the adventures? I'm like, no, I'm dying to know. This is horrible. So yeah, that.
Well, that's how I felt at the end of the Harry Potter series.
Yeah. Just like, but wait, what happens? Oh.
When someone tells me I couldn't put this down, like when something that I wrote, when somebody reads something that I wrote and they text me and they're like, dude, what did you just do to me? Or when they say, at the end of Living Stone, I had several people at the end of Living Stone after they finished it go, I was weeping at the end. I was crying at the end, and I was, I was thinking about this story too. So I wrote a children's book. I've written a couple now, but not published, but, and I was sharing it with my writing group, and it was about two characters, and one of them was someone with like a chronic illness. So they were trying to become friends, and they met and they were trying to become friends. But one of them had to realize that there were some days that the person with the illness was just going to be too tired and couldn't come out and play as much as she might want to. And in order for her to be a friend, she would just have to sit with her. They couldn't go out and play. They would have to just sit and dream together. So that was kind of the end of the story. And I'm telling you, and to me, I'm not tooting my own horn necessarily, but to me, it was such it made me feel like, oh, maybe I did something right, because everyone around in my writing group, like everyone around the table, a couple of them were crying because they were remembering someone they knew who had a chronic illness that they had to be friends with like that they had lost. And I was like, and that's what I was saying before we started recording. Like, a great story isn't just about that story. It will connect you face to face, like he does in the story, with your own life. It will bring up your own memories. It'll bring you face to face with your own fears. And Bastian deals with this. And one of my favorite parts is when he is in the beginning. So, he starts reading the story, and it's such a creative way to me about introducing the problem. You've got the rock dude, and they're such interesting characters, but they say, well, we have to go to the Empress and figure out what's going on. And we lost people and yada, yada, yada. And they're going through grief, right? Because the rock was like, I'm the only one that's left. The rock guy is like, I'm the rock biter. I'm the only one that's left. And anyway, so they get to the Empress, and we need this warrior, this great warrior, Atreyu. Where's Atreyu? And then Atreyu comes up and is like, this is not a place for children. and he goes, yeah, but I'm Atreyu. And it switches to Bastian, and Bastian goes, wait, he's just a boy. And that's the first inkling you get, like, oh, maybe I have value too. Like, they're saying a boy can solve this. I thought I was helpless. Like these are the implications within that, and that's what happens with stories, and that's why reading the Bible is so amazing if you read it like it's real. Like you're like, I felt too old, or I felt too young, or too broken, or too whatever, too barren. I felt too whatever. I felt those things, and God chose to use that person. Anyway,
Come on,
like
Britt.
if you really look at it like that, it's important because that's why those stories matter. And so for Bastian, that's where it starts. Like, oh, it was a kid, and the Empress is dying, and they don't say it, but for Bastian, it's like, I mean, a kid can do something with an Empress who's dying. Like, I'm sure he felt helpless when whatever was going on with his mom. I'm sure he felt helpless, like we all do when people die. That's universal, right? But
it's almost like it's not supposed to happen,
right? and so all of that in the beginning is so central to, again, why I love it is because he's bringing Bastian into Bastian's own story. And if you read the Bible correctly, that's what it'll do with us too. It'll bring us face to face with my story. What am I doing? And what are my hopes and dreams? And but I'm supposed to keep my feet on the ground. And you know, and we've all had that moment of, you know, but this just, it doesn't seem practical. It seems like it's just outside of the norm, or it's too weird. But you read the Bible and you're like, and I was so lucky to have a mom who, my parents would never say no to a book. My parents did not have a lot of money, but my parents bought me books as much as they could afford. And they never told me to go to sleep if I was reading a book. Now, if I was watching TV, they'd say, you better turn the TV off and go to bed. But if I was reading a book, they'd leave me alone.
Not me, man. My parents were the ones who were shutting the lights off.
But, you know, my parents were like big believers in reading and the importance of reading. And the fact that, you know, that they encouraged things, and that I was able to be around people in church and other people who were encouraging with those sort of just the weirdness that I was, and they accepted it, and it was just cool. Like, okay, that's who he is, you know, because a lot of people didn't have that, man. A lot of people didn't.
I did not have that. You know, I wish that I had, but you know, I found it eventually, you know, which is wonderful, you know, but I wish that I had that when I was younger, because my parents were the well-intentioned ones who were shutting the light off early, because truth to God, I would have stayed up all night to finish a book. I'm not even exaggerating. I all night I would have stayed up. And I had my parents, you know, like they appreciated who I was and that I was very creative and had flights of fantasy, but my imagination for my entire life has always been so big and vast and wide that they were constantly reminding me to keep my feet on the ground and get my head out of the clouds, and like, you know, and that's why I never told my mother I was a writer, because I was afraid I was going to get the reaction, well, that's nice, as long as you get a real job, you know, and stuff. So I got a lot of that.
So I'm going to bag on Becca a little bit, brag on my wife a little bit here. And I think I've told this story on the podcast before, but before we got married, I think we were engaged. Before we got married, Becca sat down with me and she said, "What are your dreams?"
Oh, that's so sweet.
Like, more than anything else in life, what do you want to do? And I was like, music. Like, I was a public school teacher, but I was like, I want to write books. I want to write music. I want to write, you know? And she said, all right, it's my job to help you do this. It's my job to help you accomplish these things. And I was like, what the heck did I do to deserve this? Like, what the heck? Like, but those are the kind of people that we need. That's the kind of people that when you find a community like Realm Makers, right, where you find a community of people where you can get with like-minded people and you can be encouraged in those things. But man, I just, again, we can just keep going with what happens with Atreyu, but it's interesting because if you notice at the end of the book, at the end of the movie, the Empress, who, by the way, I don't know, like whoever the casting person was for Neverending Story, they did an amazing job. That little girl that's the Empress was phenomenal.
I don't think she ever acted again. She was in
I don't know.
She did some theater and that was it. Yeah.
But just her face was compassion. Mm-hmm. Her face, like just the look, it was just so amazing. But she's like, oh, I knew this was going to happen the whole time. And he's like, then why the heck was I doing this? And she said, you were doing this to bring someone else here.
Yeah.
So in other words, he was and we got to realize this, like God sometimes takes us through things. Mm-hmm. It's not just for us. God does 8 or 10 things that we know of at the same time. Like he has different levels of purposes in every event that happens. Mm-hmm. He's not just doing one thing. He's doing one thing individually with you, but then he's thinking of the people who are going to hear your story.
Yes.
10 years down the road. He's thinking of people who you're going to be sitting with, like I was a couple of weeks ago at the Florida Christian Writing Conference, and I'm sitting there mentoring new writers, and they're like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And I'm like, I know, I've been there, but I've been there. I've been where you are. And now here I am. And, and I get to tell them one of my favorite writing quotes, which is, a professional writer is an amateur who didn't quit. Yeah. Like it's not talent. It's the people who were stubborn enough to go, I'm just going to keep doing it and learning and moving forward and being able to encourage people or in your marriages. I'm so glad when Becca and I were married, especially for Becca, I'm so glad that we had mentors who, when I was leaving a wet towel on the bed in the morning, and Becca reminds me on her side of the bed that we had mentors who had been married for 25 plus years, that Becca could go, Britt left the wet towel, his wet towel on my side of the bed again, and I've told him and he just did it. And my mentor's wife Alice, who was very much like Becca, and Larry he and I were very close in personality type and everything. Alice was able to go, it's okay. Larry used to do that stuff too, and he figured it out. Like it's like someone who's been down the road, but it's all of that together. It's all of that at the same time. And just like she said, people are reading Bastion's story and then now it's going to inspire them to live their story. And that's the power of this thing. Yeah. Is that when the worst thing we can do is to think we don't have a place in the story. Mm-hmm. That's the enemy and that's the lie. Because I don't know if Sarah's ever dealt with this, but when you're a writer and you're thinking, how many freaking fantasy novels are there out there? Just published, not to mention the unpublished ones. And why would I do this? Mm-hmm. But there's only probably 2 main stories that you could possibly tell. It depends on which book you read. It could be 7, right? There's only 7 stories ever or whatever. But the point is that it's Sarah telling the story now. Yeah. Like that's what makes it different. And that there's someone who reads it the way Sarah tells it that can connect with it in a way that no one else can. And that's why God wants her to tell her story. Yes, the stories that she's writing, but also the story she's living, to tell the story that she's living. Because there's somebody out there that needs to hear that. And to me, it's so powerful.
That's so good. That's so good. I mean, I absolutely have struggled with that for sure. And as recently as this past summer when I started my blog, because I started that, after my mother had died, to kind of, ease back into writing. And I picked starting a blog because I thought it would be easy. Not quite and stuff. But even then, I was like, the only reason the blog got up in the first place was because my friends are amazing and they just like led me through it by the hand and, kept pushing me to do it. But I remember like many times I asked them, was like, you guys, why am I even doing this? Like, who is going to want to read my blog? How many movie review blogs are out there? Like billions. Okay. And why is anybody going to care about what I have to say? I was asking myself this last week, like, why is anybody going to care what I have to say, especially when there are so many people out there talking about the exact same movies and stuff. But yeah, because I put myself into it. I mean, any of you guys who have read my blog, know that I get pretty personal. I surprise myself that I get that personal in them, to be honest, because I'll be writing it and I'll be like, well, I didn't plan on talking about that, but okay, it's there, whatever, and stuff. But I mean, I talk about a lot of struggles that I've been through, like being bullied, losing my mom, being single, so many things that I've had to deal with. And I always, try to put in there like, hey, I know how you're feeling. If you're struggling with this, I've been there. I know, and I always try to encourage and be like, hey, you know what? Life's not static. Things change. It gets better, and stuff. And then it gets bad again, but then it gets better again, and stuff. But yeah.
We'll just say it out loud. You're really good at what you're doing. It's really fun. Yeah. I enjoy it, and you're very good at it.
Thanks.
And there's no one like you. There's no one doing it like you. Yes, it's unique enough. That's one part, and then the other part is one of the most powerful things that can happen is when people say "me too." Now, I know there's the Me Too movement, and I'm not against that at all. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when we're vulnerable enough that I can say, hey, I'm having trouble with my teenage son or something. I mean, I'm vulnerable enough to go, look, I don't care if I'm a pastor. I don't know what the heck I'm doing sometimes when I'm a parent, right? Whatever. And then you can have somebody else like Paul going, yeah, me too. I was there. Or you can have other people who are, you know what I mean? Like, but if we're not vulnerable about it, we don't get the Me Too comfort. Yeah. We don't get the comfort of, yeah, I've been there. And I'm telling you, man, to me, I know, like Paul was like, I don't know why people are so upset at this whole Artax guy, the horse dying. But if you've ever been in sadness enough that you think you can't get out, you get it.
Yep.
You get it. And if you've ever seen someone else in that place too, you get the helplessness of trying to get them moving. And one of my favorite lines in the movie is, if you don't move, you'll die.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that is a truth about life. Mm-hmm. That line is one of the most true statements you can make. If you don't move, you will die. Talking about like the good shepherd and sheep. Like, why does a good shepherd move you with the rod and the staff? Is because what happens when a flock of sheep stays in one place for too long? They eat all the grass and they starve and they die. They're too stupid to go look on their own. The shepherd has to smack them around and go, no, you got to keep moving or else you'll die. But when you're in grief and when you're in sadness and when you're in these things that the world naturally does to you,
yeah,
we need the people who are like, no, come on, you got to keep moving or you'll die.
That reminds me of, so I want to interject. This I talk about in my chapter a little bit, but I used to be a therapeutic mentor for teens. And I had this one girl who, was dealing with a lot. She had a lot of depression and stuff, and she used to cut herself. She had a really difficult time. This was a huge struggle for her. So I introduced her to the concept of journaling, and she had never journaled before. She didn't like to read, she didn't like to write. And I told her, I was like, look, you don't have to write. You can do journals in so many different ways. You can do an audio journal. You can do a collage journal where you just cut pictures out of things and stick it into a book. There's so many different ways. It doesn't even have to be writing. I said, the point is, I want you, when you're feeling like anxious or depressed or feeling like you've got to have some kind of a release, I want to give you another way to release than hurting yourself. So when you're feeling this way, I want you to put it all into this book, and I don't care how you do it, whether it's ripping pages out or taking a big Sharpie and just scribbling all over the page. Just whatever you're feeling, put it into the book. Don't put it on yourself and stuff. And it changed her life and stuff. It changed her life. I bought her a 99-cent composition book at the dollar store, and it changed everything for her. And we started talking about journaling. I told her how journaling had really helped me, because not only is it a release for you, then later you keep that journal, you're able to go back and look at what you came through and keep your story alive, because we forget. We forget. We're overwhelmed by emotions, by situations, time goes by, but you go back to your journal, no matter what kind it is, whether it's a video blog or, whatever you keep, and you're able to see what God has brought you through, and, know that when things get bad again, because they will, that you got through it before and you can get through it again and stuff. So that was just so powerful to me. That's what I mentored for 10 years. And that's one of the ones that always sticks out to me, because it was so powerful. I couldn't get over how much that changed everything for her.
So we've talked a lot about the power of story versus the escapism sort of, and the escapism can happen through practical things, through work, through stuff that you've got going on, but you're escaping the reality. Or just, as you mentioned, it could be, for a lot of men, unfortunately, it's porn. It could be Netflix and chill. It could be all sorts of things but the motivation is you're trying to escape relief. I loved what you had said earlier, Britt. And you see that here and that's sort of the combining thread of what we've been talking about, is the power of story, because we've all been through stuff. We've all experienced stuff. And to realize, one, that we're not alone, and two, that I think that is really the big thing. We're not alone.
Good.
Because as I mentioned on the John Wick YouTube thing, one of the lies he believed is that he went through all this stuff alone. But that was a lie, because Marcus was there all along. And so I'm going to play that clip. You guys have both referenced it a couple times, where it's towards the end, and Atreyu goes before the Empress, and she's like, "Oh yes, you're bringing the Earthling child," and he's like, he feels like he's failed,
right?
And then he's felt like I've lost my horse, I almost drowned, was it in vain? Which I think when we get to that point where we're actually dealing with our story, we start struggling with these questions.
Good.
And I do have to say, this is a lengthier clip that I've cut out some of the extra sounds, so there might be a couple jumps in it, but it's really the thread of this scene to try to get, a 5+ minute scene into less than a 2-minute clip.
I have failed you, Empress.
No, you haven't. You brought him with you.
Who?
The Earthling child. The one who can save us all.
You know about the Earthling child?
Of course. I knew everything.
My horse died. I nearly drowned. I just barely got away from the nothing. For what? To find out what you already knew?
It was the only way to get in touch with an Earthling.
But I didn't get in touch with an Earthling.
Yes, you did. He has suffered with you. He went through everything you went through. And now, he has come here. With you. He is very close. Listening to every word we say.
What? Where is he? If he's so close, why doesn't he arrive?
He doesn't realize he's already a part of the never-ending story.
They can't be talking about me.
Maybe he doesn't know what he has to do!
What do I have to do?
He has to give me a new name. He's already chosen it. He just has to call it out.
But it's only a story. It's not real. It's only a story.
Bastian, why don't you do what you dream, Bastian?
But I can't. I have to keep my feet on the ground.
Call my name.
But one of my favorite lines is, he doesn't know he's already a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's what God says to many people. It's not that he's inviting you into it. He's trying to tell you you're already a part of it. It's not, yes, he is inviting you into it, and you have to be a part of it by choice, just like Bastian did. But in God's mind, when he created you as a part of the story. He created you as part of the redemptive story. That's what was on his mind. That's the character you were in his mind. He's just trying to get you there to that, what you already are in his mind. He's trying to reconcile those two things that are contrary to one another. The character that he created you to be, the heroic, the strong, whatever, that person he's created you to be that you've always longed to be and you fantasize about, but he's trying to get you to be that person in reality. And because Atreyu goes through those things in the story, because another one of my favorite parts, the fact that he first has to go through the two gates before he gets any answers. And the two things he's got to get through is he has to know his own worth. Yep. And I wrote down, what's more frightening than knowing your own worth? That's frightening, because you know what that means. You know why that scares the crap out of us is because we're not doing enough. Mm-hmm. If we knew our own worth, we would do more things. Like we would do more stuff, and it would be like we'd have less excuses. If we knew our own worth, right? It's a scary thing. And then, but if you don't know your own worth, this is what I wrote down. If you don't know, because what was next was he had to look at himself to see his true self. Mm-hmm. If you don't know your true worth, you will not have the strength to face your true self. In other words, unless you know how God sees you, you will not have this and loves you. In his mind, what's reality, you will not have the strength to see where you've failed because you will think less of yourself.
Yeah.
But God doesn't think less of you. God, right? I'm just saying and the fact, and that's, and this is why I love it, because it's in that part where he goes before the mirror, Bastian picks up the book and throws it. Because he doesn't want to look at himself either. He doesn't want to look at who he is either. But I'm telling you, I know, people even on Realm Makers have argued this, and I just kind of stay out of it. Like, oh, there's nothing wrong with escapism, and but I'm like, that's not the purpose of story. That God did not create story to be escapism. God created story to bring us into his story. That's why he created story. Is to bring us into his story. And that's the purpose. That's why we do this podcast. That's why we do this stuff, to say, no, this isn't just escapism. These are clues. It's a mystery. We're like Scooby-Doo, right? And we wouldn't have got away with it too if it wasn't for those crazy kids. This is like
one of those crazy podcasters.
And the enemy's trying to get us to escape, where God's like trying to open our eyes to a reality and he does it through fiction, through made up stories. Like how weird is it? Like, these are weird characters in this. There's a flying luck dragon, and there's all this. By the way, one of the reasons why we picked this movie is every kid wanted to ride that dragon. Every kid wanted to ride that dragon. Maybe the horse too, but definitely Falcor. And then they put it at the end of the movie, where what's your first wish? It was all of our first wish who were watching the movie. That was my first wish. We were all like, yes, that would have been my first wish too. But my point is that that's the purpose of story, and that's the power of it. And when he finally gets to that point, when Bastian realizes he has worth, this is who he really is, and then he says things like he was going to quit, especially after Sadness, and he goes, Atreyu wouldn't quit. So he keeps going. And that's why that's the power of story. Is it makes us honest about ourselves, but it also inspires us, and all of those great things that Bastian learns by the end. And by the way, without great story, he would have lost his mother forever. But he actually got to rediscover his own mom. He didn't lose her completely. If he had just gone to escapism or practicality and the nothingness, he would have lost her. But instead, through his memories and imagination and facing his own grief and fears, he was able to hold on to her in beauty and love and who she really was. And that's what was on the other side of that story for him.
I love this clip so much. I mean, it's so powerful for me. I actually have it on like a little playlist I have on my YouTube channel, you know, where I just, if I need like extra inspiration one day, I just, you know, pull it up and stuff. Because going back to the Podfather, Alan Arnold, you know, it's just like Bastian has a choice, like right up until the very end, he has a choice to believe or to not believe. And he could have just, you know, completely convinced himself, yes, this is all just a story. I'm going to close the book. I'm going to walk away because this is reality and this is who I am. And, you know, this is just, you know, like, this is just a fun dream that I'm just going to put away on the shelf. And then the other choice is to be everything that he's ever dreamed that he could be. And all he has to do is choose yes. He doesn't know what's going to happen if he chooses yes. He doesn't know what's going to happen. He's pretty sure that it's going to be something epic and huge and stuff, but he doesn't know what the consequences of choosing yes and choosing to believe are going to be. And God doesn't give us the answers either. He just says, do you want to come? I've got more for you if you want it. It's here. I want to give you everything that you've ever dreamed of. And it might look different than what you dreamed of, but it's going to be incredible, whatever it is, you know. And I just, as somebody who, when I was growing up, like I said, my head was always in the clouds and I was always imagining things that I wanted to do and people that I wanted to be and adventures that I wanted to have. And I was always getting brought back to reality so hard. Like, I swear, sometimes I swear I would close a book and it would be like physically painful to come back to reality. You know, the disappointment would be so great, you know. And so, like, knowing that God has given us this offer and that we can choose to believe it and that it's real and that it's not safe, you know, and that it's real, was so like freeing for me once I got that mindset, once I got a hold of that, to know that there's so much more, that we don't have to just settle for like an ordinary life. We don't have to settle, you know, for a 9-to-5 job and paying our taxes and, you know, doing all that God has put us in an epic adventure, that he's built this life for us, that he's crafted a destiny for us that is so way beyond anything that we could ever imagine. It just makes my brain explode and stuff. And it gets me so excited just thinking about it, that he never meant for any of us to live a quote unquote ordinary life. He never meant that for any of us and stuff. And you know, that I love that. I love that so much. It's so radically freeing. There's so much freedom in choosing to believe, not just in what God's given you to do, but in who you are, what your identity is. And, you know, that he gives the Empress a new name. There's so much identity in giving something a name. You know, you're calling it into being, you're calling it into reality, you know, and stuff. I love that. I love it so much. It's so great.
And so we're going to make the turn towards home. because there's, as we've mentioned, there is power in the story. There's power in Sarah. One of the words you used a few times is imagination. Because, and we've in prep for this, we talked about Stephen Pressfield's War of Art book. And he talks a lot about resistance. Whenever you're pursuing that movement towards growth, there's resistance. It could be going to the gym. It could be writing in a journal. It could be going to church. It could be whatever you pick. Anything that you pick that is inspirational, that is not, that the resistance is not going to flare up if you're choosing relief, if you're choosing escapism, if you're choosing the practicality, because you're settling. If you're settling, the enemy's going to let you do that. And so there's a scene in the movie where he talks to, how do you say his name? Gamork.
Yeah.
He talks where Atreyu talks to Gamork.
Nanu.
Who's the enemy?
Was that?
What?
Not Mork.
I said Atreyu.
Gamork.
Not Mork?
That's what I said. Gamork.
Oh, not Mork and Mindy?
I always thought it was the Mork.
Not-
I am the Mork.
Not Mork and Mindy?
Oh
Not
my gosh,
Nanu.
So there's a scene where Atreyu comes face to face with Gamork, who is an agent of the Nothing, who's sucking everything up, who's they're fighting against. Atreyu asks him, why is Fantasia dying? And I think that this is because we've talked about one aspect of it, but there's another force in play as well.
But why is Fantasia dying then?
Because people have begun to lose their hopes and forget their dreams. So the Nothing grows stronger.
What is the Nothing?
It's the emptiness that's left. It is like a despair, destroying this world. And I have been trying to help it.
But why?
Because people who have no hopes are easy to control. And whoever has the control has the power.
That doesn't sound like this world at all, is it?
I know, man. That's such a great
People
line.
who have no hopes are easy to control, and whoever has the control has the power.
Fear is a great way to try to control people. Fear is the opposite of hope, right?
Yeah.
And we all deal with fear. Like it's not wrong to be afraid because of our English language. We identify with our feelings. We say, I am hungry. But in other languages, that's not what you say. You say, I have hunger. So your desire is separate from your identity. Does that make sense? So in Spanish or German, you say, I have fear. But in English, we say, I am afraid. Like we identify ourselves by our feelings. Therefore, all that to say is fear, which a lot of people are feeling in the movie because of Nothing but the Bible says we've been translated from the kingdom of darkness to the kingdom of light. And darkness has no substance. Darkness is nothing, is the absence of light. Darkness is nothing. A shadow is nothing. But the opposite of nothing is substance. Light is a scientific impossibility. It's both a wave and a particle. Like for years, science argued which one was it, because there's no way it could be both. Just like the Jews are like, there's no way he could be human and divine. There's no way that could be true. But he was, and that was important, right? And so all that to say is, I love that. I love that explanation there at the end too, where the wolf is really, it's like the devil's playbook. He's just showing his hand right there at the end. Like this is the devil's playbook right here. He's going to make you afraid, take away your hope. That's how he controls you.
Another thing that's really interesting in the book, actually, obviously there's more detail in that scene, but the Gamork actually lies to Atreyu, or he deceives him, I should say, where he says that that an earthling child won't help. I'm really condensing it here. But he basically said an earthling child won't help you because, all earthlings know how to do is lie, basically. And there's a really interesting contrast between imagination and creativity and lies and stuff. And we can see very easily how those things can be sometimes mistaken for each other. And so, he really, brings Atreyu down, and gives him a lot of despair because he's just like, it's all lies. He won't help Fantasia. He won't be able to do anything because everything that's, a part of Fantasia, all of these incredible, fantastical creatures, none of it is real because it's all just lies and stuff. Whereas imagination and creativity is bringing things to life and creating something that wasn't there before and stuff. And lies are just all about deception, and deceiving people, and things that aren't real, that aren't going to stand, that aren't going to last up against a truth.
Well, that's an interesting concept, Sarah, because creativity is, before it's created, it's a lie. Like your book technically doesn't exist yet. Mm-hmm. So if you say you have a book, that's sort of a lie, but it exists in your head. Because like they created these things, they created, whether it's Men at the Movies or Forged in Film or Kingdom Over Coffee or whatever you're working on, before it exists, what you imagine is a lie because it doesn't exist yet. Mm-hmm. In a certain way of looking at it.
Yeah, well, yeah, but here's why creativity teaches us about God. Because what creativity says is something is real in the unseen before it is real in what is seen in reality. Right. And so what is unseen is more powerful than what is seen, because that's where it all begins. It all begins in the unseen and becomes manifest in what is seen. And that is who God is. That's what we see. When God first says there is light, but he had the thought first that became manifest in the word, and then light happened, right? And so when we are creative, even though some people pervert it and do it for nefarious reasons, maybe.
Devil perverts everything.
But that doesn't negate the fact that creativity is an aspect of who God is and who we are with his image. And, as we're kind of closing up here, my questions are, is it really impossible that you're supposed to be a part of the great story, the great redemptive story? Is it really impossible? Because that's what Bastian keeps saying. It's not possible that I'm a part of this. Like that couldn't be real. But it is real, and I'm here to tell you, it's not just that it's possible; it's absolutely true that you are already in God's mind a part of the story. That's how he feels about you. That's what he wants from you. It actually makes him happy. The Bible says it gives him great pleasure for this to happen. It's his joy that was set before him. He endured the cross so you could be a part of this story. And so that's the reality. And so just to believe that you're meant to be a part of the story. Now, that may not mean writing fantasy novels. It may not mean doing creatively artsy things. It may mean
working a 9-to-5 job.
Might mean working a 9-to-5 job. It might mean adopting a child. It might mean there's a lot of things. God will ask you to do something that's outside of your box. I'm just telling you, that's the formula. If you want a formula, that's your formula. The formula, God will not ask you to do something you would have thought of yourself. Yeah. That's the formula. He was going to ask you to do something that you didn't think you could possibly do. Whatever it might be. It could be a lot of different things. It's a long list, but that's the story, because at the end, he does that, because at the end, all you're going to get to say is God did this. Mm-hmm. That's why he does it that way. Because if it was about you, then what do we need him for, right? If it was about my strength, what do I need him for? And the other thing is, when we look at this, when we sit down and we meet people, go beyond the surface and get their story. Mm-hmm. Go beyond the surface and get their story. Don't settle for, I'm okay. How are you doing? I'm okay. Ask for stories. And you could just Google that. There are questions that are designed to do that. But ask for stories. I did this the other night. Beck and I were sitting at a table with people that we didn't know. And before the night was through, I was asking questions like, but what do you want to do with your life? Is this what you want? Like, I'm asking questions that are further than just, oh, I got this degree and now I'm happy. Like, no. What if you could do anything and get paid for it? What would that be? Right? And you get some really interesting answers that way. Because most of the time it's about helping people, by the way. That's been my experience. They think of ways they would want to help other people, which is really telling to me. But all that to say is get people's stories and tell other people's stories. Be vulnerable, be willing to tell stories, because that's how we get intimate with one another. That's intimacy, that's relationship, and that's when real stuff happens.
For my closing thoughts, I would just want to encourage everybody who's listening to this to do what you're afraid of. To take that step, whatever is on your heart, whatever you feel is like calling you, to just throw off all your fear, don't try to rationalize yourself out of it. Whatever kind of a desire that God's put in your heart, just step into it, because he wants to do something with you and he's giving you an opportunity. And, just like Bastian, just do it. All right, I'll do it. I will do what I dream. He's giving you the dream for a reason, and
Amen.
To quote another book, if you don't find a way, no one will.
The whole thing with this idea of the stories and the power of stories is its power to inspire us and to avoid becoming an escapist or becoming sort of a practical person with your feet on the ground, because we weren't called to have our feet on the ground. We are called to have our head in the clouds, to think of more of the other kingdom more than the kingdom of the world we're living in. And when you read great stories, what the things that we talked about, they read you.
Oh, you read.
And they expose who we most want to be, the characters you hate, probably the person you're scared of becoming. But when you're watching a movie or when you're reading a book or engaging in story, and something triggers and there's and there's a character you love or a character you hate or a scene that hits you, just ask God and say, hey, what's going on here? What are you trying to tell me? Because through story, your worth and your identity is revealed. Because that's how God built us. I mean, that's how Jesus told stories all the time. And so that he could say, the kingdom of God is like this. The kingdom of God is like this. And what was he doing? He was telling them their worth and their identity, which is something that's very hard for us to grasp because there's always that nothing out there. So if you would like more of this conversation, we are taking it to YouTube. I promised Sarah that we would talk about the story, the music, the song, The Neverending Story, especially as it relates to Stranger Things season 3. So check us out over it's youtube.com. It's our channel is at Men at the Movies, because we've actually somehow managed to corner most of the market on Men at the Movies. So check us out over there. We're going to dive deep into that. Not too deep, because there's only so much recording space in my my hard drive here. So Britt, Sarah, thank you for staying up with me on a Monday night talking about The Neverending Story. And so I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you join us next time here on the Men at the Movies podcast.
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, who am I to be?